Chapter 5. Debt should feel uncomfy. My finances improved beyond my dreams. It was the fall of 2016, and I was looking for a room to rent in Carlsbad, a breezy coastal area in the northern region of San Diego, California. I had started a new job a few months earlier and was looking to live nearby to have a shorter commute. I'd found a Craigslist post that matched what I was looking for, posted by a woman by the name of Claire. Claire's Craigslist post described her as a homebody, dog lover, and fitness enthusiast. Sounds great so far, I thought. When I met her to view the available room, I brought my dog, Bailey, to make sure she got along with her two slightly overfed black Labradors. The dogs sniffed butts and chased each other playfully in the backyard. Claire was friendly and patiently answered all my questions about the family-friendly neighborhood and the 3-bedroom home she lived in. I'd be sharing the home with her. Later that evening, I told my mom I had found a new place that checked all the boxes. It was a 10-minute drive from my new job, had a large yard for my dog, and the monthly rent cost was affordable. She looked at the pictures of Claire on Craigslist and turned to me in horror. She warned, "Don't move in with her. Tiene cara de loca." I shrugged off her baseless opinion and signed the lease later that week. My nightmare housemate. At first, our living situation was great. Claire worked part-time at a grocery store, which meant she spent a lot of time at home. It felt comforting knowing Bailey had company while I was away at my desk job most of the day. When I arrived home, I was welcomed by the scent of cinnamon sticks and orange peels from the simmer pots Claire would boil on the stovetop. When I worked late, she'd leave me a note on the kitchen table that read, "Help yourself to some leftover soup." Even though she was 30 years my senior, we had a nice roommate dynamic. We'd frequently spend evenings talking about our family back home or our challenges at work. I felt safe and at ease, and Bailey had new dog friends to play with. A month later, our new roommate, Jen, joined us. Jen was a child-free yoga instructor a few years older than me. She was laid back, tidy, and respectful. The home felt like a Zen sanctuary and a nice respite from my demanding work hours. But only a month and a half later, Jen informed me she was moving out. I was surprised to hear the news. I figured she must have gotten a new job in a different area, or maybe she'd gotten her own apartment for more privacy. Moving in with the boyfriend? I playfully teased with a grin on my face, wanting to get the tea on the new relationship. She shook her head and flashed an uncomfortable smile. She admitted that she didn't feel safe around Claire. My stomach sank, and I looked at her in confusion. "Claire spends all day drinking in her room," she whispered. On 2 separate occasions, she'd seen her slam cabinets in the kitchen while mindlessly mumbling to herself and screaming at Jen unprovoked. Jen was your typical yoga instructor, cool, calm, and collected. So I really couldn't make sense of why Claire would ever scream at her. This seemed so out of character, vastly different from the Claire I'd gotten to know in the last few weeks. But Jen spent a lot more time with Claire at home than I did since they both had flexible work schedules, and I was at the office all day. Jen moving out so quickly raised a red flag inside me. First, my mom had said she had una cara de loca. Now, Zen Jen was saying Claire was frequently drunk and erratic. What was I missing? It didn't take long until I got a taste of the real Claire. A few weeks later, she pulled me aside to angrily scold me and say I had to do a better job of cleaning the home. This was the first time she'd brought this up, so I was confused by her condescending and accusatory tone. I figured maybe she'd had a tough day at work, so I said I understood and I'd be happy to chat about cleaning expectations to make sure we were on the same page. Later that evening, she handed me a list of daily, weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly cleaning duties. Immediately no. I can admit I'm no Marie Kondo, but I always make sure to tidy up after myself as I go. This list felt like I was a child given a chores list to earn a weekly allowance. Only there was no allowance at the end of the week. The way she snapped at me and the ridiculous list was a little jarring, but not bad enough that I felt I couldn't live there anymore. By the next week, Jen was out. Claire started acting more distant than usual. She dodged my eyes when I entered common spaces and spent a lot of time locked in her room alone. If I needed to ask her something, she coldly replied in one-word answers. The simmer pot days were long gone. One evening, I was cleaning up after dinner when I opened the trash can and found it topped to the rim with a pile of empty Sutter Home mini wine bottles. There had to be 20 of them stuffed in the trash can. My mind filled with panic. Jen was telling the truth. Claire was an alcoholic. Now, I am no persinada. I drink and enjoy a good michelada or Bellini with friends. But stacks and stacks of wine bottles seemed excessive and disturbing, especially from someone who claimed to live a healthy and fit lifestyle at our first meeting and on her Craigslist post. Claire was not who she portrayed herself to be, and it made me feel unsafe. What else could she be lying about? That same night, I started looking up new apartments, but all the options I found were expensive and outside of my budget. I was starting to get a little worried about my living situation. My home no longer felt like a safe haven. When driving home from work, I often wondered what version of Claire I would see at home. The sweet Claire who shares the dinner table with me and asks me about my day, or the rude, disheveled one who treats me like I called her mama a bitch. I was living with the wild card. The unpredictability felt unsettling, especially when I knew that in a couple of months, I'd have to start studying for a rigorous work certification. I needed a safe and quiet space to live and study in so I could pass my exam. My home was like a minefield, and I constantly felt on edge as I anticipated Claire's next outburst. I opened up to a colleague at work about what was happening at home. She listened with horror in her eyes and urged me to leave ASAP. She even gifted me a pink pocket-sized pepper spray to protect myself with. The last straw was when I came home early one day and found the house looking like it had been through an earthquake. The living room was turned upside down. There were blankets and pillows manically thrown all over the floor. The rugs were crinkled up, and all the house lights were off. Her dog's water bowls had not a single drop of water in them. Her dogs were like her children, so this was especially alarming. I topped up the dog's food and water bowls and looked for Claire, but she was nowhere to be found. The kitchen table was completely covered with half-open mail showing past due and termination notice in urgent, bold red font. Another one said something about foreclosure. Oh my God, Claire was going through severe financial problems, which explained the excessive drinking and mood swings. Drinking issues, erratic behavior, and financial problems seemed like a recipe for disaster, and I wanted no part of it. These malas vibras were not it. I had to get away, and fast. Desperately seeking affordable options. The problem was that all the apartments I found in the area were almost twice what I was currently paying. I was paying $900 to rent a room, and I could hardly manage that. A one-bedroom apartment in the area would cost me at least $1,500. Rooming with another Craigslist random wasn't an option because I knew I needed stability for my upcoming exam and my mental well-being. I couldn't risk living with another wild card and having another bad roommate situation. To make matters worse, almost none of the apartments I found accepted my 60-pound Labrador mix, Bailey. I needed a new home ASAP, but affordable housing was almost impossible to find for my dog and me. My mind was racing with desperation. I needed a solution. To make my problem worse, I only had around $1,000 in savings, not enough to cover a moving deposit and moving costs in San Diego County. My debt was out of control. I had a ton of student loans, credit card debt, and a car note, all of which were eating up most of my income. I had a prestigious white-collar job, but was living paycheck to paycheck. Although I had my parents' emotional support through this nightmare roommate situation, they didn't have the extra money to bail me out and help me find a safe new home. They couldn't help me pay for a portion of my new rent while I got back on my feet. They were hardly managing their own expenses. I felt completely helpless, stressed out, and on my own. I had a hard time sleeping at night, and my anxiety made it difficult for me to get through my workday. Is this what I worked so hard for? to be stuck in situations where I felt like a helpless victim. A way out. After weeks of desperately searching for a new home, I finally found a one-bedroom apartment that accepted a large breed of dog and that I could somewhat afford. I wouldn't have a lot of money left over at the end of the month, but I could manage to scrape by. I drove to tour the unit with high hopes. The unit had popcorn ceilings, an old white electric stove, and cheap vinyl flooring. It was outdated, cramped, and musty. It wasn't an apartment I'd be proud of, but it was safe, close to work, and most importantly, would be all mine and free of Claire. I went back to the leasing office and cheerfully informed the leasing manager that I wanted to apply for the unit on the spot. I was so relieved my apartment search was finally over and I'd finally have a safe space for me to live in. I was in the middle of the application process when the leasing manager tapped on my shoulder and politely told me, "Miss, I'm so sorry. The unit you just viewed and are applying to was just taken by another applicant." A tidal wave of emotion hit me all at once. I buried my face in my hands and started sobbing deeply. I couldn't believe I had just lost this apartment. I had no money, no control of my circumstances, and now no apartment prospects. I had nothing. The leasing manager was visibly taken aback. My reaction was so over the top. She probably thought, wow, all this over an old apartment with popcorn ceilings? I'm sure she thought I was being a drama queen. But I'd been so stressed about moving and money for weeks that I was so relieved to have finally found a solution, only to have it taken away from me at a moment's notice. Fortunately, she was compassionate enough to talk to her manager and make an exception and get me a similar unit for the same price. I was out of Claire's home by the end of the month. The burden of debt. As I look back at this difficult time in my life, I can clearly see how my poor money management skills had caught me with my pants down. I had no emergency savings and a ton of debt that took up the majority of my income. At the time, I didn't understand how debt was holding me back. I figured that as long as I could manage the minimum payments, I'd be okay, and the debt would eventually pay itself off with time. I didn't understand how debt could affect my lifestyle, my mental health, or my financial wellness. I didn't feel the urgency to pay it off. As first gen, a lot of us start life in the negative. It's hard to avoid debt as a new adult when you come from nothing. Debt is almost a necessary evil in our journey to get ahead in life. I wouldn't have been able to attend college had I not taken student loans. I wouldn't have been able to easily get to my part-time job and drive to my college classes had it not been for a car loan. I don't regret taking on debt, but I wish I'd had a plan to control it. Instead, it controlled me. This is why paying off debt is one of the 5 pillars in my First Gen 5 framework. My goal in this chapter is to educate you on why debt should be treated like an emergency, to explain the benefits of a debt-free lifestyle, and to give you actionable tips to learn how to pay it off proactively. What is debt? In the simplest explanation, debt is borrowed money that needs to be paid back. Money is typically loaned by a financial institution like a bank, credit union, or credit card company. Now, these institutions don't loan you money out of the kindness of their heart. The reason they loan you money is that they get to make money off what they loaned you. They call this interest. Interest is the price you pay for borrowing money. When you borrow money, you're expected to pay back the amount you borrowed plus interest. A glimpse of debt-free living. When I was riddled with debt, it was hard for me to picture life debt-free. I had debt since I was 17 and didn't even know what life as a debt-free adult felt like. Because it felt like a distant destination, it was hard for me to get excited about it or to give it much priority. It wasn't until I had my horrible Craigslist roommate that I understood firsthand how debt was holding me back and having a negative impact on my life. I don't want you to have to learn the hard way like I did. As someone who is now proudly debt-free, let me share some of the benefits I wish I'd known sooner of living a debt-free lifestyle. More space to work on things that excite you. Once your debt is paid off, any money that was being taken up for paying back debt is now freed up for you to use as you wish. This means your hard-earned money isn't going straight to creditors anymore. The extra money is called disposable income. You get to decide what to do with it. You no longer feel like you're working just to pay back the money you owe others. And it feels incredibly liberating. This is extra cash you can use to fund your life goals and dreams. You'll now have the disposable income for that down payment on your first home, or to treat yourself to that nice tropical vacation you've always dreamed of. You'll have extra money to generously support those who matter to you while still having plenty for yourself. Less stress about money. Once you become debt-free, you'll feel a huge burden lifted off your shoulders. You'll be more financially secure and will have more power to avoid toxic situations like a bad roommate or a bad boss. Debt no longer owns you. Your physical and mental health will improve because you'll have more wiggle room in your finances and won't feel as cash-strapped as you did when you had debt. With debt, you feel like you're swimming against the current. You can take broader strokes and kick as hard as you want, but at the end of the day, you still feel tired and like you didn't make much progress. When you're debt-free, it feels like you're on a floaty, chilling down a lazy river on a sunny day with a margarita in hand. Debt-free living is elite. Increased flexibility in lifestyle choices. Now my favorite benefit. With a debt-free lifestyle, you'll have more flexibility to say yes to you. You'll get to decide where to live, what kind of career moves you can make, and what kind of lifestyle to live. A big reason why I was able to quit my stable corporate job to become a full-time TikToker was because I was debt-free. Since I had no debt, my living expenses were lower, which meant I didn't need much money to cover my basic necessities. That meant I was able to take risks with my career and switch to a new industry, even if I wasn't making much money at first. When I was up to my neck in debt, I needed an extra $900 just to cover my debt obligations. There is zero chance I would have left my steady job for the unknown if I still had thousands of dollars of debt. Debt would have held me back. And what a waste of my talent that would have been. Living a simpler lifestyle with little to no debt lets you design a life where you're in the driver's seat. Your debt doesn't call the shots. You do. Activity. Envision your debt-free life. Now, take some time to dream about how you'll use your extra cash once you become debt-free. First, get a rough idea of how much of your monthly money is going to debt right now. When you eliminate your debt, the money will be completely freed up for you to use however you want. What will you do with it? What financial goals will you use the extra cash for? Will you use some of the extra money to buy products or services that make your life easier? Keep these answers in mind and use them as motivation as you read through the rest of this chapter. Limiting beliefs about debt. You are worthy of a debt-free and abundant life. It's waiting for you. But before you embark on this journey, we need to clear out some of the mindset blocks from both society and our upbringing that can hold you back from seeing debt as the emergency that it is. What messaging have you heard about debt at home? I'll go first. Debt is normal. This is a belief I inherited from my parents. I remember when I decided to get serious about paying off my debt, I excitedly shared my plans with my mom. Instead of hearing encouragement from her and getting praise for making better money choices, I heard, "What's the point? You're always going to have debt in some shape or form." My excitement was shot down and deflated. As of this writing, I've been debt-free for 3 years, so the notion that you'll always have debt is simply not true. I now know that firsthand. But back when my mom told me this, I didn't have that lived experience. I was younger, impressionable, and not as experienced with money management. I thought maybe she's right. After all, she's my mom and has been on this earth longer than I have. She must know what she's talking about. Now that I've experienced the benefits of a debt-free lifestyle, I'm so relieved I had the determination to reject that limiting money belief and break that generational cycle. This is why it's important to surround yourself with a like-minded community who are supportive and can cheer you on while you're working on improving your finances. I don't fault my mom for having that negative money mindset. I have compassion for her. The system was not created for her to thrive in it. She was never taught financial literacy, and our capitalist society preyed on her and other marginalized groups to spend and consume at the expense of her financial well-being. But just because someone is family or older than you, it doesn't mean you should take what they say as the law. I'm never going to pay it off. I frequently hear this one from money coaching clients, and recently from a client with $200,000 in student debt. I completely empathize with someone who feels that way. $200,000 is a lot of money, and it can feel like pushing a big heavy boulder up a steep hill. In some parts of the country, you can buy a home with that amount of cash. It's even more demoralizing when you realize more privileged people like privileged Patties and average Amy's got to dodge debt or minimize their debt while we are stuck dealing with the financial burden. I think it's almost criminal that someone can gamble their money away at a casino and file for bankruptcy, but a student who pursued a higher education for a chance at a better life is shackled with student loans for life. Until public policy changes, we are stuck with student loans, so the best we can do is learn how to manage them. My advice for anybody who feels overwhelmed by their debt: take a moment to pause, breathe, and affirm to yourself, you have everything you need to accomplish anything you want. You can pay off this debt, but it will take a plan, time, consistent work, and patience. I will teach you how. Latinas and their cars. In addition to our limiting money beliefs, I've also observed that Latinas' obsessions with cars keep us in the cycle of debt. Since I can remember, I've always heard my family describe success by what someone drives. Just the other day, when I was visiting family, my nana was telling me about a neighbor's daughter and how successful she is. Le va muy bien. Trabaja en el gobierno y trae un carro del año. In America, I think it's common to describe someone's success by their title and employer. It sounds something like, oh, and she's a VP at Goldman Sachs, or she's a director at Microsoft. I've never heard someone in America add, and they drive a new Tesla. But for some reason, it's what our community considers a marker of success. We need to have an honest conversation about the chokehold cars have in the Latina community. We place too much value on what kind of car we drive. As mentioned earlier, my theory is that since a lot of us didn't have access to financial literacy, we mistakenly believe we need to show our wealth by what's visible. Does everyone have access to your bank statement to see how much money is in your checking account? No, but anyone can see what type of car you drive up in at the family carne asada. And that's what you're measured by. Remember in Chapter 2, I mentioned my dad owns 4 cars? He has the 4 cars as a status symbol, showing anyone driving by his home that he's el más chingón de toda la cuadra. But a car shouldn't be viewed as an investment or a status symbol. A true investment increases in value over time. A car is a depreciating asset, which means it loses value over time. If you buy a car this year, in 5 years it will be worth less, not more. As a matter of fact, new cars lose value as soon as they're driven off the dealer's parking lot. Instead of making you money, a car costs you money in the form of car insurance, maintenance, repairs, registration fees, gasoline, and car payment. A car is nothing more than a tool. A car should be viewed as a tool you need to drive from point A to point B. Don't fall for the marketing schemes that say you need a new luxury car to live a happy life. 2 of my best friends fell for these advertising ploys and bought matching white BMWs. They constantly complain about the high maintenance costs and half-jokingly say they want to light their cars on fire to cash out on the car insurance settlement. By the way, don't do this. This is called insurance fraud. They're not worth the headache. The goal is to drive something that's safe, reliable, and reasonably inexpensive to maintain. A practical car like a Honda Civic or a Toyota Camry are tried and true vehicles that are cost-effective to buy and upkeep. You shouldn't tie your level of success or self-worth to the kind of car you drive, even though you may have grown up hearing otherwise. What kind of car do you think the average millionaire drives? Mercedes, Ferrari, or BMW? According to a study by Experian Automotive, 61% of wealthy people drive a Ford, Toyota, or Honda. Rich people, they're just like us. But in all seriousness, they understand it doesn't make financial sense to spend a lot of money on a car that's going to lose value over time. Instead of driving fancy cars, they drive modest cars and invest the difference in the stock market, a business, or real estate. That's how you build true wealth. Avoid ongoing car debt. Most traditional personal finance books will tell you to buy a lightly used, reliable 2 to 3-year-old vehicle. This is because they don't have the high maintenance costs of older vehicles since they're still relatively new and cost significantly less than a new car at the dealer. With the pandemic, the low supply of cars has made used cars just as expensive as new ones. I've had 2 cars, and both were bought new. Not because I wanted something del año, but because I knew I lived far from family, and if I had any mechanical issues, I'd be on my own to handle them with an untrustworthy mechanic. If you buy new, the smart thing to do is to drive that thing until the wheels fall off. In my family, it's a very common practice to buy a new car with a 5-year loan, and once that loan is paid up, go back to the dealer and treat yourself to a newer model. A conversation about this came up with my family a couple of years ago. I excitedly told them I was a few months away from paying off the car note for my 2011 Toyota Corolla. My uncle said, "Good for you. So what car are you buying next?" That's not the point. This is how you stay stuck in the cycle of debt. Instead of taking on another car loan, be smart with the extra cash freed up to you from no longer having a car payment, aka your new disposable income. You can use the extra money to build savings, pay off other debt, or invest. That is how you improve your finances, not by digging a hole and getting yourself into new car debt. My family bullied me for years for driving my paid-off Corolla. They said I should treat myself to a new car and have something I was proud of driving and being seen in. I patiently explained that I was using the extra cash to pay off debt, but it didn't matter to them. All they saw was that I was being a coda and didn't want to spend money on a new car, even though my Corolla was in perfectly fine condition. It didn't feel good to be teased by my family. But I no longer let others make financial decisions for me, and you shouldn't either. Don't let others pressure or ridicule you into making money moves that you can't truly afford, even if it is family. Is all debt bad? We spent the majority of this chapter talking about how debt can hold you back from the fabulous and abundant life you're destined to live. We also covered some of the limiting beliefs that can keep you from handling debt more aggressively. Now, let's go over different types of debt and how they impact you. Some types of debt are worse than others. Here are 3 types of debt you should know. Debt for nothing. The types of debt that fall into this category are credit card debt and consumer loans. This is the worst kind of debt you can have. Avoid it like the plague. If you have this kind of debt, prioritize paying it off over other types of debt. It's also known as bad debt. Debt for nothing usually comes from excessive consumerism, like overspending on clothes, furniture, dining out, or buying the latest gadgets. The reason I call it debt for nothing is that although spending money on these items does give you a quick hit of dopamine when buying, they aren't increasing your net worth or helping you build generational wealth in the long term. Getting into credit card debt for an Instagrammable, trendy fall wardrobe isn't going to make you money or increase your net worth. In 10 years, you'll have nothing of true value to show for that debt. If it's not helping you build long-term wealth, you should avoid getting into debt for it. If you don't have the cash for it, then you can't really afford it. This type of debt can typically be avoided by creating a spending plan and buying the items with cash, and avoiding any interest payments. What makes this type of debt worse is that it usually comes with higher interest rates, usually in the double digits, which means the items cost you more to buy. Debt for nothing is usually impulsive and is made in the name of instant gratification. You can also accumulate debt for nothing from emotional overspending, as an unhealthy way to cope with loss or grief. If you have this kind of debt, I don't want you to feel shame for it. Have some compassion for yourself. You're already doing better by reading this book and taking ownership of your money journey. But understand that carrying this type of debt will make it incredibly hard to make real progress toward your financial goals. This is your break glass in case of emergency moment. You need to prioritize paying off this debt first. More on how to pay off this type of debt later in this chapter. Debt through emergencies. The types of debt that fall into this category include medical debt, credit card debt after being laid off, or debt from an unforeseen accident. Life happens, and sometimes when life throws a curveball at us, our finances take a hit. That's okay. You can prepare yourself for life's ups and downs by having the proper insurance and having a peace of mind fund in place, as discussed in Chapter 3. Debt for your future. The types of debt that fall into this category are student loans, mortgages, and business loans. While it's the least bad of the three to have, be cautious and thoughtful before taking it on. This type of debt is usually necessary to make large purchases like attending college or buying a home, an investment in your future. Unless you have rich parents or hit the lotto, the majority of us are going to have to take on this type of debt to make these large purchases. Attending college should give you a higher earning potential than someone who didn't attend college. It's an investment in your education that should pay off in the long term. Taking out a mortgage helps you buy a home to live in and gives you an asset, the home, you can eventually sell off for money. Taking out a business loan to open your own coffee shop can be an investment in the future if your business succeeds and is profitable. Investment debt usually comes at a lower interest rate. For example, some of my federal student loans had an interest rate of 6%, which is much lower than the double-digit interest rates of debt for nothing. Debt for your future is usually well thought out and part of a long-term vision to improve your financial future. Other financial experts will call this debt good debt. I hate that term. Calling this type of debt good debt caused me and other millennials to be reckless with student loans. I took out more student loans than I needed for college because I didn't understand how loans and interest truly worked. But back in high school, one of my teachers claimed student loans were good debt. This was the only reference I had to student debt, that it was good debt. When the financial aid offered me money in student loans, I figured, well, it's a good kind of debt, so yes, more of that, please. Debt is still debt. All debt holds you back from using your money towards your personal life goals and dreams, and should be avoided or mitigated when possible. How to pay off debt. In this chapter, we've discussed how debt puts a drag on your finances, the benefits of a debt-free lifestyle, how to overcome limiting beliefs about our ability to pay off debt, how buying new cars keeps us in the cycle of debt, and the 3 types of debt you can have. By now, you should feel eager to make a more concerted effort to slay your debt. But what if you don't have extra cash to pay off your debt more aggressively? Here are 3 things you can do to free up more money to pay off debt. 1. Decrease your spending. If you feel like you have no room to make extra payments beyond the minimum payments on your debt, try looking into ways to decrease your spending. Can you reduce your housing expenses by temporarily moving in with a roommate or moving back home? Can you switch your cell phone plan from a traditional wireless provider to a prepaid provider? Can you cut back on your eating out and save money by cooking at home more often? Remember, hay comida en la casa. Can you cancel subscription services you aren't using to save some extra cash? According to CNBC, 42% of people have forgotten that they're still paying for a subscription they no longer use. Who really needs that many subscriptions? That's a lot of potential savings. Get creative and think about all the different ways you can reduce your spending. Review and analyze what you're spending money on and trim out the extra fat. Your budget review from the previous chapter will help with this. If you review your spending patterns and find you only have an extra $50 to use toward debt, that's okay. The goal is to use any extra money to pay more than the required minimum payment. For example, if your minimum payment is $200, but you make a payment of $250, that extra payment of $50 will help you pay off your balance quicker and get out of debt faster. 2. Increase your income. If your spending is already lean, then consider increasing your income instead. Can you speak to your supervisor at work and make yourself available for overtime hours? Or maybe it's time to find a new role altogether and give yourself a pay raise. Job hopping is one of the easiest ways to gain a significant salary increase. According to the BBC, job switchers were able to receive a 12% raise by job hopping. It sure beats the measly 2 to 3% annual raise your employer will probably give you for staying in your current role. Or can you pick up a side gig like babysitting your neighbor's kids to make extra cash? Could you sign up to deliver groceries on Instacart or pick up some shifts as a bartender at a local restaurant? There is a limit on how much you can trim your spending, but there is no cap on how much you can grow your income. Start exploring new ways to earn extra money and use the extra cash to attack that debt. You can do this. 3. Decrease your spending and increase your income. If you can swing doing both at the same time, it's like adding gasoline to a fire. That's how I turbocharged my debt repayment. I made the sacrifice to move out of state from San Diego, California to Phoenix, Arizona. I didn't want to leave the beautiful California coast. I had all my friends and family there. In Phoenix, I knew nobody. And to make it worse, the summer weather was scorching hot. And the state was full of gun-toting, red MAGA hat wearers. But I knew I had to temporarily change my lifestyle to improve my finances, and moving out of state was the fastest way for me to do it. This is how moving to Arizona accelerated my debt repayment. The cost of living is 31% lower in Phoenix than it is in San Diego. With my housing costs being lower, I was able to decrease my spending and use the extra cash savings towards paying off my debt. I also increased my income with my new job in Phoenix. My new role came with a $10,000 pay raise, which meant I had additional money to use toward my debt. I decreased my spending by lowering my housing costs while increasing my income by finding a better paying job. Double yay. If you can't pull off option number 3 right now, don't feel discouraged. Doing one of the 3 I mentioned above is still better than ignoring your debt and just making the minimum payments. Focus on what you can do and strategize the best way you can put that extra money toward paying off your debt. Pick a debt payoff strategy. Now that we've covered different ways you can create more space to pay down your debt, let's discuss how you'll strategically use the extra money. If you're ready to slay your debt, here are 4 practical steps to follow. 1. Organize your debt. First, go to culturacash.com to access the CNC resource pack and download my free debt tracker. Use the fillable workbook to organize your debt by name, outstanding balance, minimum payment, interest charge, and payment date. The tracker will help you follow along with your own finances and will give you a clear picture of where all the bodies are buried. Factor in all debt, including student loans, medical debt, car loans, mortgages, credit card debt, etc. We already did some of this work in Chapter 4, Budgeting is Your BFF. Don't let the math scare you. I promise it's simple. I kept the numbers nice and round so they'll be easy to follow. Let's walk through them together with the example below. Example. Sonia has the following 3 debts. Student loan, $10,000. Minimum payment of $400, 5% interest. Car loan, $2,000. Minimum payment of $300, 10% interest. Credit card debt, $5,000. Minimum payment of $50, 20% interest. 2. Pick a debt repayment strategy. Out of the 3 debts above, which one should Sonia tackle first? Should she focus on one over the other? Or should she focus equal efforts on paying them all off? Someone with limited money skills might see the example above and be immediately drawn to paying off the biggest debt, the student loan debt at $10,000. At first, it might make sense to pay off the loan with the biggest balance, but when comparing that debt to the other 2, you'll notice that the loan has the smallest interest charge at only 5%, which makes the cost of borrowing money relatively cheap. Even though the balance is the highest, because the interest is lower, the debt is cheaper than the rest. This doesn't mean you should wait the full 10 years to pay off student loans because, remember, debt is still debt, and all debt holds you back. But since it's the cheapest debt on your list, it shouldn't be your first priority to tackle. Instead, it will be smarter to use either the debt snowball or debt avalanche method. How the debt snowball method works. With this method, you focus on paying off the debt with the smallest balance first. Following our example above, this means Sonia should focus on the car loan of $2,000 since it has the smallest balance of the 3. Using this strategy, Sonia would pay minimum payments on the student loan and credit card debt, $400 and $50 respectively, and focus all extra payments on the car loan. Why it works. The snowball method works because you'll pay off the loan with the smallest balance relatively quickly. It's a lot faster to pay off a loan of $2,000 versus $10,000. A bigger balance takes longer to pay off. Once you pay off that first loan, you're going to feel instant gratification for having one less debt to worry about. Your 3 debts now went to 2. This win will give you the motivation you need to keep making progress toward paying off your debt. They call it the snowball method because the momentum to pay off your debt will snowball and lead to more positive change. You'll get a little pep in your step and feel more confident about your money management skills. If you've paid off one debt, you have what it takes to pay off the rest. Any plant mom will understand this analogy. It's kind of like when you manage to keep your first houseplant alive. When you maintain the first one, you wonder, well, what other types of plants can I handle? You start doing some research and decide to graduate from low-maintenance succulents to needier plants because you know you can keep them alive now. Next thing you know, you're in a home full of plantitas. Knowing you have the skills to keep the first plant alive gives you the confidence to take on more in the future. How the debt avalanche method works. With this method, you focus on paying off the debt with the largest interest first. Following our example above, this means Sonia would focus on the credit card with an interest charge of 20% since it has the largest interest of the 3. Using this strategy, she'd make minimum payments on the student loan and car loan, $400 and $300 respectively, and focus all extra payments on the credit card balance. Why it works. The reason this strategy works is because it will save you the most money in interest charges. Since it's a debt with the highest interest charge, it's the most expensive debt out of the 3. This makes the most mathematical sense to avoid the most interest charges you can. Who wants to pay more money to these creditors? Not me. If you're motivated by saving money in the long run, This might be a better strategy for you. With this method, your progress won't be as fast as the debt snowball strategy. With the snowball method, you target the smallest debt balance first, knowing it's going to be faster to pay off than a bigger balance. For example, a $500 balance can be paid off in a couple of months, whereas a $5,000 balance might take years to pay off. That means that if you choose to use the debt avalanche method, you have to feel comfortable seeing a large balance until it's paid off. The benefit of the avalanche method is knowing you save the most money in interest costs by targeting the highest interest debt first, the most expensive debt on your list. So which method is better? It depends. What motivates you more? Is it seeing your debt decrease from 3 loans to 2? Then the debt snowball might be a good fit. Or are you more motivated by knowing you save the most money? That's the case for me. Mentally, I'm okay knowing I won't see a $0 balance anytime soon. I feel happier knowing I save the most money in interest charges in the long run and raise my middle finger to the credit card companies. Think about which of these methods resonates with you, pick a strategy, and get started. I'm rooting for you. 3. Pay more than the minimum. To recap, the first step to paying off debt is first getting all your debt organized, which includes understanding what types of debt you owe, the outstanding balance, minimum payments, and interest rates. My free debt organizer helps with that. The second step is to choose a debt repayment strategy, either the debt snowball or debt avalanche method. Once you've completed those steps, step number 3 is to commit to paying more than the minimum payment. It will be nearly impossible to get out of debt if you keep paying the minimum payment, especially if it's high-interest debt like credit card debt. Paying the minimum payment might seem convenient. It's a smaller payment, which means more money for you now. But the smaller payment comes at a big price to future you. Paying the minimum payments keeps you in debt longer, which means you'll end up paying more money in interest charges. This will cost you much more in the long run and will make it harder for you to make positive progress toward more fulfilling financial goals. Let's say your minimum payment is $50. Instead of just paying the $50, throw any extra cash you have toward paying off the balance. Even if it's an extra $20, it will still help you pay off the debt more quickly than if you just paid the minimum payment. 4. Patience is key. Reward yourself along the way. Lastly, be patient. You didn't accumulate this debt overnight, so it's unrealistic to think it will be paid overnight. The best way to pay off debt is slow and steady. Set up micro goals and stay consistent. Be kind to yourself, stay focused, and keep making those extra payments. When you start feeling like you're losing motivation, remind yourself why becoming debt-free is important to you and use it as momentum. Reward yourself as you make progress by treating yourself to a relaxing pedicure or a celebratory drink with a friend. Find a like-minded community that's also focused on its debt payoff journey to keep yourself accountable. The CNC Resource Pack includes access to an exclusive Discord channel where you can meet and get support from other readers of this book. Celebrate your payoff wins on social media. Most people will be happy for you and cheer you along. You can do this. Navigating debt with your familia. Now that we've learned what debt is, the benefits of living a debt-free life, and strategies to pay it off for good, let's talk about how to navigate debt with your family. As first gen, it's not uncommon for our family to tap us on the shoulder and ask us to take out a loan on their behalf. As we covered in Chapter 2, we operate as a collectivist culture. We are communal people, so going to our family when we need support is a natural choice. Financial institutions aren't exactly warm and welcoming to immigrants with limited financial means. It's hard to find a bilingual speaker they can trust, and all the legal paperwork can be intimidating to sift through. Their income or credit score may be low, and they know you have an easier time getting approved for a loan anyway. It's much easier to call on their daughter or niece, la que gana bien. Navigating debt with family can get tricky. One of my friends, let's call her Marissa, told me she had a big fight with her family because she wasn't willing to take out a car loan for her younger cousin. Marissa is the most financially stable in her family and has a good credit score, so naturally, the family turned to her. She told her family she wasn't comfortable with the arrangement, and they angrily told her she was a malagradecida and a bad cousin/niece. It caused friction in her family and made her feel taken advantage of. Before taking out a loan for family, whether it's for business, a car, or a mortgage, think of the following. 1. Understand the consequences. Taking out a loan is a big financial commitment. In a perfect world, you'd take out the loan, your family member would make timely payments, and the loan would be paid off quickly. But we don't operate in a perfect world, so it's important to understand what could happen in the worst-case scenario. Let's say Marissa had taken out a car loan for her cousin. But 6 months later, her cousin was fired from her job at Subway and could no longer make the car payments. The loan still needs to be paid. And since Marissa took out the loan in her name, she'd be on the hook for making the payments. If Marissa doesn't make the payments, her credit score will suffer. After enough missed payments, the bank will forcibly take the car back in what's called a repossession. A repossession will have a serious impact on your credit score. It can affect your credit for up to 7 years. Maybe Marissa can manage to make the payments, but at the expense of her own financial wellness. Because she's having to make extra payments on her cousin's car, she has less money to save for her down payment fund. Now she doesn't have money to catch up with friends over dinner. Now she's living paycheck to paycheck, or even worse, she's getting herself into debt to meet all her financial obligations. All this trouble for a car that wasn't even hers. Taking on debt for someone else will also make you less desirable to lenders. Your credit score may take a dip since it shows you're under more debt, and lenders will think it's riskier to loan you money. Let's say that in a year, you want to buy a new car for yourself. Because your credit history shows you have your cousin's car debt as your own, you may have to pay higher interest on your car loan, or even worse, straight up get denied for a loan. If you co-sign on a mortgage for a family member, when it's time for you to buy your first home, you may miss out on first-time home buyer benefits. These include extra tax deductions or first-time home buyer programs. The home you bought as a favor to your family would be viewed as your first home, even though it's technically not. Lastly, in this worst-case scenario, if the loan goes south, it can ruin your relationship with that loved one. I think anyone who decides to loan money to family does it with the best intentions. But if someone stops making payments and becomes a mala paga, will you be angry at them or resent them? Would you feel comfortable knowing this could forever change your relationship? This is my personal rule. I don't loan money I can't afford to lose. If I decide to loan money to a loved one, I see it as a gift. I choose to loan money because it brings me joy to be able to help someone I care about, if I can financially afford to, of course. But I understand humans are complicated beings and don't feel the same urgency to pay back someone they know as they do a big bank. Naturally, there is more flexibility with a human being than with a global financial institution. If I loan money, I'm not expecting it back. If I do get it back, it will be a pleasant surprise. Back in my Craigslist roommate days, I couldn't afford to gift money. If this is the case for you, then it's time to set the boundary. More about that in a bit. 2. Come up with a repayment plan. If you've practiced the quiero y puedo approach and decide that taking out a loan for a family member is the right choice for you, I suggest you have an open and honest conversation about your expectations. Explain why you agreed to help and that you're hoping for the best, but have a transparent discussion about the consequences of falling behind on payments. Come up with a payment schedule. Do you prefer they make payments to the bank directly? Do they need to email you proof of payment for your records? Or do you feel more comfortable with them sending you the money in advance and you make the payments yourself? Get clear on when the payment due dates are, the payment amount, and the timeline for when it should be paid off. Word of caution: proposing a written agreement might not go over well. Your family will view it as too formal and may feel offended because they think a contract is a sign that you don't trust them. If you feel uneasy loaning the money without an agreement, listen to your gut and offer help in other ways. 3. Set the boundary. I've had to set this boundary with both my parents. My dad recently asked me to take out a mortgage on his behalf. He said, "Don't worry, mija. I'll make the payments, and when the house is paid off, I'll leave it to you as a thank you." Okay, generational wealth. I trust my dad and know he's committed to paying back the money he owes. He'd take up an extra job and suffer in silence before missing a payment, so I wasn't concerned about him being a mala paga. I love my dad, but I told him I couldn't do him that favor because I knew it would put a strain on my finances and affect my eligibility for first-time homebuyer benefits for my first home. I could tell he was a little disappointed, but he understood and didn't pressure me to change my mind. This is a best-case scenario. Your family makes a ask, you politely decline, and they understand and move on. Your family may not be as understanding. I've had those experiences too, and they're tough to live through. Sometimes you turn into the black sheep for prioritizing your finances. You need to be okay with that. It's not easy. But understand, it doesn't make you a bad daughter or a bad family member. You can offer support in other ways. If they're open to receiving another type of support, tell them you're happy to spend time with them crafting a budget or offering resources so they can learn how to improve their credit score and can secure loans on their own. Ultimately, the choice is yours whether to take on debt for your family. I would personally only agree to take on debt for someone else if I knew I could manage the payments on my own and knew I wouldn't resent them later. Whatever your choice is, let it be a decision you made on your own because it aligns with your values, priorities, and financial ability, and not because someone else is guilting you or pressuring you into doing it. This can take time to master, but the more you practice honest money conversations with family, the easier it gets. You can crush this debt. In this chapter, we cover how debt, although a necessary evil for most first-gen, can put a strain on our finances and make it harder to reach our financial goals. It's harder to save for a new home, replace our car, or pay for a graduate degree if the majority of our income is being eaten away by debt. A debt-free lifestyle gives you more flexibility and allows you to design a life with intention. We discuss some of the most common limiting beliefs about paying off debt and how we can overcome them. We covered the different types of debt you can have, ways to come up with extra cash to pay it off sooner, and different methods to pay off your debt balance strategically. We also explored how you can navigate loaning money to family, whether it's by coming up with a plan for them to repay you or by implementing financial boundaries. Debt can feel like the least sexy of the first-gen 5 pillars. But paying off debt is as equally important as planning and saving for the future. And remember, every time you pay off a debt balance, you have more cash to use on things that matter. Once you've put in the work and made it to the other side of your payoff journey, you'll feel a new sense of confidence and accomplishment. The future version of you deserves this. In the next chapter, we'll do a deep dive into how building a strong credit score can give you options when you most need them. Building a healthy credit score can be accomplished a lot faster than paying off large sums of debt, saving for a peace of mind fund, or investing for the future. It's an easy win and one that could come with a lot of savings and perks. Let's get to work.